During the evacuation of the typhoon, my mother ignored my broken leg. He personally pushed me off the rescue boat and forced me to give way to my sister. Mom, my leg fell. I want to walk with you. Don't be so delicate. You are the boss, and it's right to let your sister. Why are you still ignorant when you are so mature? Do you have to fight with your sister at this time? That I haven't shown up for a long time. Someone advised her to call me. She is just losing her temper and deliberately making me anxious. I just said that she was a white-eyed wolf. How dare she deliberately not answer the phone? If you have the ability, don't hit me for the rest of your life. However, Mom, I'm really not ignorant and angry. I just didn't have a chance to pick it up. 1. The typhoon is roaring mixed with heavy rain, and the flood has swept over the first floor. The evacuation team was crowded on the platform on the second floor, and everyone was desperately trying to board the rescue ship. There was a blood stain on my pants. When I went downstairs just now, my half-sister pushed me and made me roll down the stairs. I gritted my teeth and tried to stand with my other leg. As soon as I got on the boat, I felt a hand holding my shoulder. Looking up, it was my mother. She pushed me off the boat without saying a word. Sue ran, go down quickly. Give up your seat to your sister. Her voice was anxious but not warm at all. I was suddenly pushed to the ground, and the severe pain struck. The leg injury was more serious, and the whole calf was completely numb. Aunt Wang, the neighbor next to her, was so scared that she quickly persuaded her. Xiao Ran's leg is so seriously injured. Let her go up. Let her do it. My mother didn't hesitate. It's okay. She is very honest and she is already an adult. She can wait for a wave of boats. She didn't shy away, and there was an impatience in her tone. My heart suddenly sank and my eyes were blurred. After my mother pushed me away, she turned around and carried my sister onto the boat. My sister hugged my mother's waist tightly with tears in her eyes and refused to let go. Mom, I also want to walk with you. My voice choked. My mother looked down at me with a cold look. You are the boss and it's right for my sister. When are you still arguing with her? But my leg fell, Mom. As it's okay, don't be so coquettish. Be sensible. Your leg is not broken. Can't you wait for the next trip? Her hand gently patted her sister's back, as gentle as coaxing a child, but that tenderness never gave me. The rescue ship gradually started, and I looked at the figure slowly moving away, and my heart was cold. Aunt Wang's voice came with the wind and rain. Since you divorced her father, Xiaoran has been following her grandma. It's rare to come back. Why are you still so cruel to her? My mother sighed with a trace of irritation. It's annoying to see her face and my heart is blocked. I stood where I was and tears flowed down my cheeks with rain, feeling that the world suddenly became distant and cold. 2. After they were rescued, they were uniformly sent to the centralized transfer point. The news on the radio attracted everyone's attention. According to the latest news, the water level in the southeast of the city is rising rapidly, and the rescue team cannot enter, and the rescue is difficult. There was a commotion in the crowd. When Aunt Wang heard the news, she immediately came to my mother's side and lowered her voice and said anxiously, "Did you hear that? The water in the southeast area is so fast that the rescue team can't get in. Our community is in that area. You have to ask Xiaoran if she has come out. Don't let anything happen." My mother frowned, but she didn't seem to panic at all. She waved her hand and responded lightly, "It's okay. Su Ran can swim, and there will be no problem." Her tone was cold, as if she was not referring to her own daughter, but an irrelevant passerby. Aunt Wang suddenly became anxious and grabbed my mother with worry in her eyes. "Her legs are like that. Aren't you in a hurry? If you fall like that, I guess it's broken. How can you swim? What if something happens?" My mother listened and sneered gently with disdain on her face. "The leg is broken? It's just a fall. It's not so delicate." Her tone was full of impatience. Besides how hard we were at that time, we had to work as usual even if we fell harder. It's really can't bear any hardships like today's children. At this moment my sister suddenly sneezed lightly. My mother's face suddenly changed, as if the emergency switch had been pressed. She immediately bent down and touched her sister's forehead anxiously. "How could you sneeze? Did you catch a cold? Baby, are you cold? Do you have a headache?" She looked flustered, her tone was soft, and she had completely changed. Immediately she stood up in a hurry, took her sister's hand and ran to the medical area. "Hurry up, don't delay, see a doctor quickly, it will be troublesome if you catch a cold." Her voice was urgent, and she kept her sister's side almost every step away, carefully hugging her, fearing that she would feel any discomfort. Her anxiety, concern and worry are all poured on her sister. And this kind of meticulous care is what I have never enjoyed. 3. At night, the light was on, and the surrounding crowd began to disperse in twos and threes to look for temporary shelter. And I still have no news. Aunt Wang couldn't help worrying. "Why don't you call Xiaoran again to ask? It's so late in case something happens to her. My mother sighed reluctantly and took out her mobile phone. Her every action reveals disdain and irritation, as if I am not a daughter to her, but a burden. You are too attached to Suran. She is losing her temper and doesn't know where to hide. She deliberately makes me anxious. She gritted her teeth and said, her voice full of disgust for me. She finally dialed the phone, but there was a long beep in the receiver, and no one answered. Her face suddenly sank and she scolded coldly. Look, I said. She deliberately didn't answer. White-eyed wolf, why are you so ignorant? You don't understand me at all. If you talk back to me all day long, you will know how to compete with your sister. I'm so mature, but I'm still so wayward. I'm really used to it. Aunt Wang wanted to persuade her, but my mother was obviously impatient. She turned off her mobile phone roughly, as if she was cutting off the last contact with me. I just can't get used to it. Do you still want me to call her again? It's impossible. If you have the ability, don't call me for the rest of your life. She stuffed her mobile phone into her bag fiercely, as if she was announcing her complete abandonment of me. At this moment, my sister gently pulled the corner of her clothes and said timidly, Mom, I'm afraid of the dark and can't sleep. In an instant, the haze on my mother's face dissipated, replaced by a gentle smile. She immediately squatted down and comforted her in a low voice. Baby, don't be afraid. Mom is here. Mom sleeps with you. She patted her sister on the back gently, as if there was nothing more important in the world than putting her sister to sleep. At this moment, her other daughter is isolated in the storm, and her life is uncertain. My safety and my situation are not worth mentioning in her eyes. She only has her sister in her eyes and only her sister in her heart. My existence is just an indispensable burden for her. 4. Early the next morning, my grandma rushed to the transfer point with an anxious face. As soon as he saw my mother, he didn't wait for the greeting and asked directly, Why is there only the second one? Where is Ran? Why didn't you bring her out? But my mother rolled her eyes indifferently with obvious impatience in her tone. Look, you are the one who got used to her. She is now in a ridiculous temper. Who knows where he went? He didn't answer the phone. I guess he was deliberately hiding from me. My grandma's face suddenly pulled down, and there was a trace of repressed anxiety in her voice. Ran is not that kind of child. She never loses her temper at such a critical time. Think about it carefully. Where can she go now? Why don't you go to her? Find it? Didn't I call last night? Can she blame me for not answering? My mother sneered, and her tone was still impatient. She is so big. Do you want me to carry her on the boat? I also have a small one. You can't leave the baby alone, can you? And you spoiled her since she was a child, which is why you are so wayward today. My grandma frowned more tightly and her voice trembled a little. I spoil her. That's not because you didn't want her at all. You left her to me. When have you done your duty as a mother over the years? Now you still blame me. My mother's face suddenly became a little unnatural, and she argued hardly. I didn't take over her because you insisted on taking her. Besides, how can I not love her? But she is ignorant and always does it against me. Just then, a staff member in uniform came over solemnly, glanced at us and went straight to my mother. Excuse me, is Sue Rant's family here? Seeing this, my mother frowned and turned around to my grandmother impatiently and said, Look, I just said she was fine. He must be hiding again and deliberately making us angry. Her words were full of complaints and contempt, as if she had convicted me. Then she turned to the staff and asked coldly, What did she do again? It's always like this. Every time I like to do some small actions which makes people unable to live in peace. Have you found her? Did you quarrel with someone again? Or did you cause some trouble? Tell me quickly and see what kind of joke she made this time. As she said, she shook her head, and her tone was full of reproach and boredom, as if she was used to my out-ordinary behavior. However, the staff's face became more solemn. He lowered his head and was silent for a moment before slowly saying, I'm sorry, please mourn. We have found Sue Rant's body. 5. As soon as the words fell, it seemed that the whole air froze instantly. The impatient and mocking expression on my mother's face suddenly froze. She opened her mouth as if she couldn't understand the meaning of this sentence. What? What did you say? Remains? It's impossible. How could she? Say it again. The staff repeated in a low voice. We found Sue Rant's body in the water. She drowned before waiting for follow-up rescue. In an instant, as if a cold wind swept around, my mother's face instantly turned pale as paper, and an unbelievable fear flashed in her eyes. Her lips trembled, as if she wanted to say something, but she couldn't make a sound. After seeing my body, my mother's face was as pale as paper, tears flowed non-stop, and her eyes were red and swollen. She sobbed and wiped her tears from time to time, her face full of pain and remorse. Ran, Mom was wrong. Mom is sorry. I didn't expect it to be like this. Can you forgive your mother? Grandma finally couldn't help walking to my mother's side, with a stern and repressed anger in her voice. I told you a long time ago to let you care more about Ran. If you don't listen, are you satisfied now? My mother was shocked by this sudden accusation, and there was a trace of shock in her eyes. Mom, I know I was wrong, but she is my daughter. How can I not love her? My grandma's eyes were sad and disappointed. Do you love her? How do you have the right to say this? You have never really done your responsibilities as a mother for a day. Do you know what maternal love is? There is only your little one in your eyes. What on earth is Ran in your eyes for so many years? Grandma took a deep breath with a trace of fatigue in her voice. You have never really put effort into Sue Ran. I know you have never liked her purely because she looks like her father. Seeing her is like seeing your failed marriage. You pass on your misfortune, your anger and your dissatisfaction on her. You have never regarded her as your child. Her voice gradually raised with deep indignation. In your eyes, she has always been the symbol of imperfection. You have never really loved her, but just regarded her as a scapegoat for your failed marriage. These words hit my mother's heart like a heavy hammer. Her face instantly became paler, as if the whole world was collapsing in front of her. Her tears couldn't stop flowing down, and her whole body was overwhelmed by blame and guilt, and she couldn't extricate herself. 6. My father arrived at the funeral site almost as soon as he received the news. His face was solemn, and he hurried into the funeral hall. Seeing my quiet coffin, a trace of pain and helplessness flashed in his eyes. Seeing my mother standing aside and crying, his anger also exploded. He went straight to my mother with obvious anger in his voice. How can you treat Sue Ran like this? If you didn't want her at the beginning of the divorce, just make it clear. Now that she is gone, you are here pretending to be sad. You don't deserve to be her mother at all. My mother's tears wet her face. Hearing these accusations, she immediately fought back and said, What? Was it my fault for the divorce at that time? If you hadn't cheated, how could there have been a divorce today? Do you think you are clean? You don't care about Sue Ran at all, only about you and the son of Xiao San. My father's face changed and he was furious. Do you think I don't care about her? Although I'm wrong, aren't you wrong? Look again. She is also a daughter left after divorce. Why are you so bad to Sue Ran alone? That's because you don't have her in your heart at all. The two faced each other, and the quarrel echoed in the funeral hall. The relatives and friends next to them couldn't help looking sideways, and their eyes were full of embarrassment and uneasiness. My mother was poked in the sore part of her heart, and a trace of anger and helplessness appeared on her face. Do you think I haven't done my duty? I also try to be a good mother, but what about you? You will only complain about me, and you will always care about yourself. With a trace of resentment in my father's eyes, he continued to blame. Did you really do your best? Why didn't you see clearly that Sue Ran didn't get real care and love since she was a child? Do you know how much she needs your love? You transfer all your failures and pain to her. Doesn't she deserve a true love? 7. After returning home, my mother's eyes inadvertently swept over the arrangement of the room, and an inexplicable feeling of distress rose in her heart. She walked to her sister's room, and the scene in front of her made her feel a tingling. My sister's room is warm and exquisitely arranged, with colorful ocean paintings hanging on the wall, soft pink blankets on the bed, and several lovely dolls at the head of the bed. The room is filled with sweet fragrance, and the small potted plants on the windowsill are full of vitality, as if it were a small world full of love and warmth. Every detail seems to be so careful, as if to create a carefree world for my sister. Her eyes gradually shifted to the marching bed on the balcony, but the arrangement of that corner was particularly cold. The bedding and clothes I used were placed on the marching bed. Everything was piled up randomly, and the corner was full of dust. Look at that marching bed. When I got up, it was like a temporary residence built in a hurry. I was like a forgotten passerby, left on the balcony casually. The air on the balcony also seems to be a little cool, which is in stark contrast to the warmth of my sister's room. A deep remorse surged in her heart, and tears rolled in her eyes. She looked at the marching bed on the balcony, and the cold words and ruthless attitude she had said to me kept emerging in her mind. She recalled my situation at home. Whenever I was sick or needed care, she always treated me indifferently, while my sister always enjoyed her careful care. What on earth am I thinking about? She muttered in a low voice, full of choking and powerlessness. How can I be so indifferent to her? She is just a child. Why can't I give her more love and care? I always regard her as the object of venting and pour out my pain and dissatisfaction on her. She didn't do anything wrong, but she was always hurt by me. She sat by the bed and stroked an old toy I left with her fingers. It was the only gift she gave me. I took good care of it, but it couldn't resist time. It had already faded. Her tears fell on it. Ran is my daughter. She has been fighting for my attention and love, and how do I treat her? All she needs is a warm home. But what I give her is indifference and neglect. She stood up and walked back to her sister's room, gently stroking the painting on the wall and the puppet at the head of the bed. Every detail makes her heart hurt more and more. She realized that she should have given me the same kindness and care for her sister, but she missed those opportunities. Why didn't I see her needs? Why am I always so indifferent to her? Her voice was full of self-reproach and pain. My eccentricity and indifference not only hurt her, but I also let her die alone. Her heart was destroyed by deep remorse. She felt that her attitude towards me was completely wrong. The typhoon evacuated, and my biased mother pulled me off the rescue ship and gave way to my half-sister 39,103-inch. She understood that she poured all her love into her sister, but ignored my desire and need for her. Her heart was torn apart by pain and realized that she had missed the opportunity to give me warmth and love, and this mistake could no longer be made up for. 8. As my various messages were spread, the society gradually had a strong response to her behavior. The news media reported one after another that the title "Mom's Indifference and Eccentricity" was popular on major platforms. The report describes in detail the neglect and indifference I suffered in my lifetime, as well as my mother's bias towards my sister. The news anchor said seriously on TV, "Sue Ran, a child who should have been loved, died alone under his mother's indifference and bias." The mother poured all her love into her other child, but showed coldness and disregard to Sue Ran. The society is shocked by this behavior and angry at the lack of maternal love. The photos in the report show the marching bed that I was randomly thrown away on the balcony, as well as my sister's warm and exquisite room arrangement. The news screen also broadcasted interviews with community residents, who expressed strong dissatisfaction and indignation at my mother's behavior. We persuaded her at that time, but she didn't listen. The community residents said angrily, "She doesn't deserve to be a mother at all. Her attitude towards her two daughters is really much worse." Some sprayed words began to appear on the walls and doors of the house, such as the words "cold mother" and "not worthy of being a mother." Graffiti and inkjet not only make her home particularly conspicuous, but also make her the target of the public. Her employer also persuaded her to quit, on the grounds that it was not good for the image of the company. After learning the news, the sister's biological father decided to take legal action to compete for custody. He told the media, "Her indifference to Sue Ran is outrageous. I can't let my daughter continue to live in such a prejudiced and indifferent family." He filed a lawsuit to hand over the custody of his sister to himself. He stated his mother's cold attitude towards me in court, believing that this kind of behavior showed that she did not have the basic responsibilities and care that a mother should have. My mother firmly disagrees. When she asked her sister's opinion, she thought that her sister would choose her without hesitation. However, to her surprise, her sister chose his father because he promised to buy her new clothes and delicious food. My mother didn't expect that her daughter, whom she loved with all her heart, would be so ruthless. She didn't understand that the more spoiled the child was, the less grateful she was. The court's final verdict was against her. The judge believes that she has an obvious deviation in caring for her children, and lacks a sufficient sense of responsibility, which poses a threat to her sister's growth and mental health. The verdict pointed out, in this environment, the child's growth is not guaranteed, so handing custody to the father is the most beneficial decision for her. One day after the verdict, my sister was taken away. She stood at the door of the house and watched her sister being taken away. Her heart was full of despair and powerlessness. 9. In the next few days, my grandma sorted out the diary I left behind and took it to my mother. She hopes that through these items, she can let my mother know more about me. Although she knows that these things may not make up for everything, at least it can make her more deeply aware of her mistakes. When my mother took these diaries, her expression was complicated. She carefully took them home and opened them. Every page is full of my expectations and love for her. She felt my sincere feelings and longing for her in my reading. "Mom, I know you are very busy and have a lot of difficulties. Sometimes I think you don't like me, but I want you to know that I have been trying to make you like me. Whenever I see your gentleness to my sister, I envy her. I know that I'm not your favorite child in your heart, but I will try my best to be myself. I hope that one day you can see my efforts and give me more love. I want to study hard, find a good job, and buy a big house in the future, so that we can live together and no longer be separated because of anything. I hope that one day we can all live a happy life." Every paragraph of text seemed so real and painful. My mother's fingers stroked those words and tears slipped silently. She gradually realized that my expectations and love for her were not only longing for her, but also a deep disappointment and helplessness. I know she doesn't like me, but I have been trying to self-verification and accept my destiny. Her heart was completely broken by these words. I saw the desire for my sister and the yearning for the future expressed in the letter, which was originally the part she accidentally hurt, but now it is presented to her in the most straightforward way. Seeing my beautiful vision for the future, but I can no longer realize these wishes, the remorse and self-reproach in my heart are getting deeper and deeper. She read a special letter that read, "Mom, I hope you can see my efforts and my desire to live a happy life with you. I hope you can give me a chance to show my value. I just hope you can be more warm and caring." Tears kept flowing. She sat on the ground, holding the items that carried my hope and expectation, and fell into deep self-reproach and remorse. 10. As time went by, my mother's mental state began to collapse. She became distracted and often muttered in a low voice, "Ran, I'm sorry. I'm sorry." Her words were full of remorse and self-reproach, but no one could really understand her inner torment. Her behavior became more and more abnormal, and she was finally sent to a mental sanatorium. In the ward of the nursing home, my grandma came to visit her. She saw that my mother's condition was getting worse and worse, and her body and mind were rapidly declining. The air in the ward was dull, and the white coating on the wall looked particularly cold, which contrasted sharply with her inner pain. She sighed softly. "Isn't it good to wake up earlier? Everything came too late. My mother's health is getting worse and worse, and her mental state is getting more and more unstable. She is often immersed in her own remorse and self-reproach, losing her former tenacity and indifference. She was deeply regretful of what she had done, and tried to find a way to make up for her mistakes. One day, she suddenly seemed to regain her sanity and struggled to pick up the phone. She dialed her sister's number, and her voice was full of expectation and plea. "Baby, can you come and see me? Mom really misses you." A cold response came from the other end of the phone. After a long separation, my sister no longer cared about her feelings and said lightly, "Let's talk about it when we have time." Her attitude was not warm at all, and the alienation in her words broke my mother's heart. Disappointment and despair surged like a tide. My mother hung up the phone helplessly and then called my grandma. On the phone, her voice trembled and was full of help. "Mom, if Ran was still alive, would she ignore me like a sister? Will she come to see me when I need it most? I really regret it." My grandma was silent for a while and didn't answer. The silence on the other end of the phone made my mother more desperate, and her voice lowered again. "I really regret it. I regret that I didn't see Ran's efforts, and I regret my indifference to her. Everything is too late. I don't know how to face these remorse and guilt." Her voice was full of deep self-reproach and remorse, and tears kept flowing down. She felt that she was powerless to change her past mistakes, and could not go back to the times that could be saved. 11. The next day, Grandma suddenly received a call from the nursing home. The voice on the other end of the phone reported the shocking news in a heavy tone. "I'm sorry to inform you that your daughter committed suicide last night." While sorting out the relics, she found a letter. In this letter, "It is my mother's last wish and regret. I know it's too late for everything. Now I just hope to fulfill Ran's long-standing wish. I hope to be buried beside her and make her wish come true. She has always been eager to live with everyone, and now I can only make up for my mistakes in this way. I hope she can feel my apology and love for her in another world. I'm sorry my mistakes and indifference hurt her. Now I can only pray that she can forgive me. I hope she can have the warmth and happiness she yearns for over there. I also hope you can understand my last choice." After reading the letter, Grandma felt extremely painful and burst into tears. She knew that this letter was my mother's voice at the last moment. Although everything could not be changed, her remorse and self-reproach were still heartbreaking. She arranged my mother's funeral and buried her next to me according to her last wish. Standing in front of the cemetery, Grandma looked at the two tombstones next to each other and felt complicated emotions in her heart. There was deep sadness and helplessness in her eyes. Although all this could not be changed, at least, the mother and daughter could finally achieve their former wish in another world and accompany each other quietly. 12. Extra. Sue Rant's mother's fantasy. I sat in the corner of the ward. The room was extremely quiet, only my occasional whisper and ticking of the clock. In my mind, I kept replaying the fragments of my indifference and neglect of Ran, and the remorse in my heart surged like a tide, almost suffocating me. It would be great if everything could be done again. In my fantasy, I seemed to have returned to the past. It was a sunny morning. I stood at the door of my house and saw Ran running to me expectantly. I stretched out my hands to her with a warm smile on my face. "Good morning, Ran. Let's go to the park together today." Her eyes flashed with excitement and nodded with a smile. "Mom, can we go to see small animals today?" I touched her hair with a smile, and my heart was full of love for her. She and I walked hand in hand in the shade of the park. The sun shone on us through the leaves, and the air was filled with the fragrance of flowers. I looked down at her, and the warmth and joy in my heart moistened my eyes. I accompany her to do what she likes, listen to her dreams, and give her support and encouragement. Her smile and happiness became the motivation of my day, and I gradually understood how important her existence is to me. I saw her achieve excellent grades in school, and showed herself confidently in front of her friends. I am proud of her and constantly encourage her to pursue her dreams. Every kiss, every hug, Every encouragement is an expression of my love for her. However, the beauty of fantasy is only short-lived. The cruelty of reality dragged me back to reality. The walls of the ward are still cold, and my remorse and pain surround me like endless darkness. I know clearly that all this is just a fantasy. I can't really go back to the past and can't really make up for the harm caused to Ran. I looked at myself in the mirror, and the wrinkles in the corners of my eyes and pale face made me feel strange. In the intertwining of fantasy and reality, I realized that I could never return to that warm morning. Nor could I really make up for the harm to Ran. I can only use my last way to satisfy her wishes, and let her get some comfort in another world. I wrote my posthumous writing to express my remorse and love for Ran. Finally, I sat quietly in the corner of the ward, closed my eyes, fantasizing about that warm morning, with a deep longing for Ran in my heart. My heart gradually calmed down, the pain and remorse gradually dissipated, and I felt a deep relief. I hope in another world, I can accompany her in another way, and let her feel my love and remorse. Teen. Extra. Sue ran in the parallel world. The morning light poured into the room through the cracks in the curtains, and I slowly woke up in the warmth. The air is filled with the smell of home, and peace of mind and warmth surround me like a tide. I sighed softly from the bottom of my heart, and all this seemed to be the most beautiful scene in my dream. I sat up and looked at the family portrait on the wall. In the photo, my mother's smile is as gentle as water, and her eyes show infinite love for me. I sat among my parents with an innocent smile on my face, and happiness overflowed. This picture is the deepest desire in my heart. It's all so perfect and warm. From childhood to adult, what I feel in this family is true love and care. Mom is always so considerate, and she will give me the warmest support at every important moment. Whether it is school activities or small things in life, she will listen patiently and give me the most sincere advice. Her love for me is not only superficial, but also deep-rooted care. I remember that every morning when I was a child, my mother would wake me up in my ear. Her voice was like the first ray of sunshine in the morning, bringing the warmth of the day. She will prepare breakfast for me, give me my favorite milk and bread, and take good care of me. Even when I feel depressed or confused, she always finds a way to cheer me up again. Every corner of our house is full of laughter. The kitchen smells of cooking with my mother, and the photo wall in the living room records the years we have walked together. Whenever I see this, a warm emotion will surge in my heart. These little things constitute the most precious treasure in my heart. Growing up in such a loving environment, my every dream is carefully cared for. No matter what kind of person I want to be, my mother will be my firm support. She will not ensue her expectations, but encourages me to follow my inner voice. Now, standing at the crossroads of my life, I look back on the past and feel full of gratitude. It is because of my mother's unconditional love and support that I can face the challenges of the future without fear. Her love is like a lamp that never goes out, guiding me forward. What I feel is the purest warmth of family. My mother's love for me has never changed. Her smile, her care and her encouragement are the most precious treasures in my life. This kind of unconditional love and support allows me to embrace life confidently at any time. This is the perfect family in my heart, and this is the maternal love I have been longing for. Here I am cherished, understood, and supported. This love makes me the best version of myself. 14. Extra, the favored sister. As long as I can remember, my mother has always been so gentle and considerate. However, in the face of Sue Ran, my half-sister, she is always very resentful. Whenever our family eats together, my mother's eyes always stay on me, while my sister eats silently like a shadow. I remember once my sister's birthday came, but the family was deserted. Mom didn't even mention it, as if it was just an ordinary day. And my birthday is always accompanied by cakes, gifts, and laughter. I watched my sister eat the cake silently, and an indescribable complex emotion surged in my heart. She has never been angry with me or blamed her mother. She just accepted all this quietly, as if she had long been used to it. Sometimes I see her sitting alone on the balcony in a daze, while I play in my mother's room. My mother is always gentle and considerate to me, patiently choosing clothes and buying my favorite snacks for me. In contrast, my sister seems to be just a passerby. Her bed is always on the balcony, which is as simple as a temporary shelter, while I have a warm room, decorated like a world in a fairy tale. I asked my mother why my sister was different from me. She always said coldly, "Don't worry about her. Mom, you only have one daughter." It turns out that in my mother's heart, she is not important, I am the only one. In that typhoon day, I pushed her when I went downstairs and she fell down. I was afraid of what she would say, but she was still as quiet as ever. Until the moment she was pushed off the boat by her mother, she didn't say that I pushed it. After that, the rescue ship took us to a safe place, but she was never with us again. I heard adults talking that she might have died. My mother began to become anxious. She often talked to herself at night. When she mentioned her sister's name, there was a trace of remorse in her voice. She always sits by the window and looks in the distance, as if waiting for her sister's return. Looking at her, I was a little scared. She was no longer the gentle mother in my impression. Later, my father said that she was sick and took me away, and her shadow in my mind became fainter and fainter.